from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: leaders of the big five emerging economies discuss the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, with a joint statement expected shortly. Our other headlines: will there be a truce in Gaza? The Palestinian armed group Hamas says a deal is approaching, but no confirmation from Israel. It's back to Beijing. Good news for travellers as direct flights with Washington resume, with more planned in the coming weeks. And Iceland prepares for the worst as authorities there warn a volcano could erupt with just 30 minutes warning. China's president says Israel is carrying out collective punishment on the people of Gaza and called for a ceasefire and the restoration of Palestinian rights. Xi Jinping is in talks with the leaders of BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa and China, to discuss the conflict in Gaza, now in its 7th week. It comes as the leader of Hamas says the group is close to reaching a truce with Israel, which could include the freeing of some Israeli hostages. The head of the United Nations is also taking part in these talks, along with the leaders of several other countries who've been invited to join the group. Well, let's talk to Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at the think tank Friends of Europe. Jamie, welcome back. Good to see you. What can BRICS countries offer in this search for a solution for the crisis in Gaza?
Good to be back on the show, Jamie. Thank you. The BRICS is certainly more relevant now as far as the Middle East is concerned, because when they met for their big summit in Johannesburg back in August, they invited the Saudis, the Emiratis and Egypt to join the group. So that means that the BRICS now has more exposure to the Middle East. That part is useful. It's also good that they've invited the UN Secretary General to participate today, because, of course, most of the action to resolve the issue in Gaza is coming from the UN and the UN Security Council, the UN agencies. So it's very important that that agency be involved as well. Certainly the BRICS is the type of grouping that can put pressure on Israel to agree to a ceasefire, to agree to let more humanitarian aid in. But many other organizations, the Arab League, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, are doing exactly the same. So the question is apart from pressure, what more value does the BRICS bring to this particular affair? For instance, will its development bank, which is going to be set up, provide more money for that humanitarian aid or the reconstruction of Gaza? One final point very briefly, Jamie, is one problem, however, is the BRICS is chaired by South Africa. And South Africa has recently accused Israel of genocide. It wants the International Criminal Court to indict it for war crimes. The Israelis have sent their ambassador home from Pretoria. So the fact that South Africa is on one extreme of this argument will mean that the BRICS won't get very much attention in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem.
And the significance of China's President Xi Jinping's words?
Well, I think it is significant because, yes, China has long been a supporter of the Palestinian cause. That's not surprising. And yesterday, Beijing did host the new Arab Contact Group, which has recently been formed, of foreign ministers in Beijing. And it was significant, Jamie, that the first visit to a UN permanent member made by this Arab Contact Group was not to Washington or Paris or London, but to Beijing. And it does show, I think, that people are looking to China to play an increasingly important diplomatic role in all of this. I think President Xi has been quite middle of the road in the sense that he's calling for what many others are calling for: a pause, a ceasefire, the release of hostages, more humanitarian aid. But usefully, he's also indicated that Beijing will contribute some money itself to that humanitarian aid. But I think in the long run, people will wait and see to what degree Chinese diplomacy can go beyond the humanitarian crisis management towards pushing for a two-state solution, stopping Iran, for example, from entering the conflict, the future of Gaza, those more long-term challenges. Will China still be influential there as it's trying to be in the immediate humanitarian crisis now?
Hamas says Gaza hostage talks are progressing. Realistically, how hopeful are you?
Well, the fact that so many people are making positive noises, whether it be Washington, whether it be the Qataris who are doing a lot of the mediating, or even the leader of Hamas speaking just earlier this morning, who is based in Doha, the fact that we're hearing these positive noises is encouraging. The Israelis, however, have been a lot more circumspect, so we wait to see to what extent any deal in the works will be acceptable to them. They're not, by all accounts, going to get all of the hostages back, mainly 50 women and children. That is certainly a very positive step. But how many days of truce or ceasefire, how long a humanitarian pause will Israel give in return? Will it expect more hostages to be released as part of the deal? We won't be there until those hostages are actually over the border and returned home. So it looks positive, but these things can go wrong at the final moment, very frustratingly. And so all we can do is watch and wait and see. The other thing, Jamie, though, more importantly, is if this deal is reached, which will be the first sort of agreement between Israel and Hamas since the tragic events of October the 7th, can both sides in the international community build on that to have further truces and humanitarian pauses and to come to some kind of end of this current humanitarian catastrophe taking place in Gaza?
Jamie, thank you for that. Jamie Shea, Senior Fellow at the think tank Friends of Europe. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Noor Harazin, who's watching events for us in Gaza. Noor, what more do we know about this potential truce?
Well, this morning, Ismail Haniyeh, chief in Hamas, said in a statement that yes, there could be a humanitarian truce here in Gaza, and that they gave their conditions and reply to the Qataris and Egyptian. Of course, this truce is brokered by Egypt, both Egypt and Qatar. Also, other leaders like Izzat al-Rishq, Ziad al-Nakhala from the Islamic Jihad, they all said that there is a humanitarian truce, even though the Israeli side is a quiet a bit. However, Palestinians here on the ground are really excited because they for once feel that this is some serious talk between Israel and Hamas, and they could reach very close to humanitarian truce. We are still not sure about the conditions of the both sides. However, over the past days, leaders in Hamas spoke about a 5 days humanitarian truce. There will be a ceasefire. They will release from their side, Hamas will release a number of Israeli captivities, and Israel will release a number of Palestinian prisoners. They will talking about 10-1, meaning that if Hamas released 10 Israeli prisoners, Israel will release 100. But still, we are not sure about the conditions and the details of this these negotiations and this truce. However, there's a very important question. Actually, the Palestinian people here on the ground are asking, what about northern Gaza? Will a ceasefire include northern Gaza? Will the incursion, the Israeli tanks will withdraw from the northern Gaza? Will people be able actually to go back to northern Gaza and maybe pick up some clothes or whatever they need from their homes? There's so many actually unanswered questions. For now, we are just waiting to see any confirmation from any side.
No, beyond the optimism on talks on hostages or a ceasefire or a truce, let's talk about the here and now. Just tell us more about the situation on the ground in Gaza.
Overnight and this early hour of the morning, and also during the day, there were hundreds of Israeli airstrikes that struck northern Gaza. For example, an Israeli strike actually bombed the Kamal Udwan hospital in northern Gaza. A number of people were killed, including 3 doctors. And this Kamal Udwan hospital is one of the hospitals that are still operating in northern Gaza. At the same time, here in southern Gaza, actually from the very first hours of this morning, the Israeli warplanes were pounding middle Gaza, Al-Nusayrat camp, Deir al-Balah, Al-Bureij camp, with tens of Israeli airstrikes, we are actually talking about massacres, whole families. For example, the Al-Hajj family, 12 people were killed while 55 people are still under the rubble. The paramedics and the civil forces could not even evacuate them because of the lack of bulldozers and fuel. There is also Al-Baz family. We're talking about 10 members of the same family, mostly actually women and children. So yes, the Israeli airstrikes continue here in southern Gaza, also in northern Gaza, while the Israeli incursion continue in northern Gaza and in central Gaza City. But we are expecting that there will be an army, Israeli tanks, land incursion also in southern Gaza in the upcoming days, maybe upcoming weeks.
Noor, thank you for that. Our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. Well, let's get you the view now from Israel and our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Sarah, what have we heard from Israeli officials about a possible hostage release?
Hi there, Jamie. Well, look, the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has just announced that he's convened the War Cabinet, the Security Cabinet and also the government for 3 separate meetings in just a few hours' time. Now, this is after he came out just a little while ago to say that we're making progress. I hope there will be good news soon. And look, this is certainly also what the hostage families are hoping for, Jamie. They have been putting so much pressure on the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his war cabinet. And we saw this really explode last night here in Tel Aviv when a number of these families attended yet another war cabinet meeting. Some of those were left out in the cold for most of the meeting. They said there simply wasn't enough room in this building to accommodate everyone. And that, of course, caused a lot of anger. While, Jamie, a number of people also left halfway through this meeting saying that the government has been sending out mixed messages and they are absolutely furious.
This is incredibly disappointing because I feel that at this point, when we know that taking down Hamas, we keep hearing from them, is going to take months or years, and it's going to take a long time. On the other hand, the other objective is time sensitive. People are dying. We know that for sure.
So look, Jamie, there is a lot of hope, of course, but at the same time, people aren't getting their hopes up, given that a number of these indirect talks have already failed.
The diplomatic talks are one thing. Let's just move on, if we can, to talk about Israel's military campaign, because there has been an update, hasn't there, from the IDF about their operation inside Gaza.
You're certainly right. Well, look, it says it's completely surrounded. Jabalia refugee camp. It says that troops have been involved in heavy clashes with Hamas militants right on the outskirts of this area, which is in the northern part of the Gaza Strip. They also say that they've found a number of tunnel entrances and they have hit a number of rocket launching sites. Now, according to the military, around 250 Hamas targets have been destroyed in just the last 24 hours as this military campaign continues. But look, Jamie, it certainly is coming at a heavy cost to the Israeli military. It has updated today the number of fallen soldiers. That is now standing at 68 people. And look, it's safe to say that the longer this military campaign goes on for on the ground, that number will climb. Jamie.
Sarah, thank you for that. Our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv. Yemen's Houthi militia have released a video showing the hijack of the ship Galaxy Leader after the vessel was seized in the Red Sea on Sunday. The Iran-backed group claimed the ship was linked to Israel, and the hijacking is a show of support, what they described as oppressed Palestinian people, and the beginning of a battle at sea with Israel. Japan's government has condemned the hijacking, confirming the British-owned vessel is operated by a Japanese company. Israel denied any links to the ship. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Is the Netherlands about to get its first female prime minister? Voters choose a new government on Wednesday.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans, grey rhinos, and unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
Well, China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us.
And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us, excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
Why, this is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. Leaders of the Big Five emerging economies discuss the humanitarian crisis in Gaza with a joint statement expected shortly. Our other headlines, the Palestinian armed group Hamas said a truce deal is approaching, but no confirmation from Israel. Air China is resuming direct flights between Beijing and Washington, with air travel between more cities planned in the coming weeks. This follows the APEC Leaders Summit, in which President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden called for more exchanges between their two countries. CGTN's correspondent Yo Yang reports.
A direct flight between China's capital city of Beijing and the capital city of the United States, Washington, D.C. resumes today right here at the Beijing Capital International Airport. As you can see right behind me, we can find the flight number is CA8710, and it will operate twice a week with a return flag making a stopover at Los Angeles.
I think the direct flight is very convenient. Before, it took me around 20 hours to travel from Beijing to Washington, D.C., and I need to make a stopover at other cities. Now, with the direct flight, it takes me only 13 to 14 hours to travel to Washington, D.C.
Since the easing of the COVID-19 pandemic, the resumption of flights between China and the United States has been closely monitored. According to the Civil Aviation Administration of China, during the 2023-2024 winter and spring flight season, the number of regular passenger flights between China and the United States is expected to increase from 48 per week to 70. This increase will provide greater convenience for personnel and facilitate economic and trade exchanges between the two countries. And Hainan Airlines, China Eastern Airlines and other companies are also planning to resume direct flights between the two sides. During his meeting with the U.S. President Joe Biden in San Francisco, China's President Xi Jinping urged China and the United States to jointly promote people-to-people exchanges. These efforts encompass increasing direct flights, advancing tourism cooperation, strengthening educational collaboration, and more. She said that encouraging greater interactions and communication between the two nations will help solidify the foundation for the healthy development of China-U.S. relations. Yo Yang, CGTN, Beijing.
Voters in the Netherlands are heading to the polls on Wednesday to choose their next leader. Immigration, the cost of living and climate change have all dominated the election campaign. Opinion polls show this election is still too close to call, and with no clear winner in sight, another coalition government seems likely. Our correspondent Alex Cadier reports.
4 parties are vying to take control of the Tweede Kamer, the Dutch parliament. For 13 years, it was this man who led the biggest party and the government. But Prime Minister Mark Rutte, known as Teflon Mark because political scandals never stuck to him, isn't standing again. Instead, his Justice Minister Delanje Schilgers is leading the charge for the incumbent VVD party, trying to balance continuity with change.
I am in politics to cherish the things that are going well and going good, but also to fix the problems people at home face. And if you look at the daily life, the daily cost of everyday living, they are rising very quickly. So people with just average jobs, average income, we see that they are struggling right now.
3 other candidates are hoping to convince voters that they are the change the Netherlands needs. Geert Wilders, Frans Timmermans and Pieter Omtzigt. Wilders leads the Netherlands Hard Right Party, calling for a stop to asylum seekers coming to the country and a ban on Islamic schools, Qurans and mosques. For the first time in this campaign, a poll on Monday had his Freedom Party tied with the incumbent VVD party for first place. His surge has led the Labour and Green parties, led by this man, to urge for tactical voting to keep the far right out of government. In August, Frans Timmermans stepped down from his role as the EU's climate commissioner to take charge of the joint Labour-Green campaign, now third in the polls. This scattered political landscape means a 3-month-old party, currently polling in 4th place, could end up deciding who will form the next government. Pieter Omtzigt, a former Christian Democrat member of the Dutch Parliament, founded his centrist New Social Contract Party in August of this year, promising good governance, social security and no further European integration. His centrist position means his support will be vital to forming any government coalition. A record 26 political parties are running in this election, and while the Netherlands is known for having quite a vast political variety, a coalition government could mean that none of the voters here get exactly what they voted for.
It's too divided now, but I think it's better than a two-party system. I think this is better, because then you have more the people, they recognize themselves in the government.
I hope for an outcome with parties that are more focused on geopolitics and on Ukraine, but also topics like the trading with China and other stuff.
I do hope there will be some positive, progressive parties winning. The polls aren't really showing that right now because most parties polling high are right or far right.
This knife-edge election only has one certainty. The Netherlands will have a new Prime Minister. But who that will be and how they'll get to office is still unclear. Alex Cadier, CGTN, The Hague.
Rescuers have released footage of the 41 workers trapped for more than a week in a collapsed tunnel in the Indian Himalayas. The camera was sent into the tunnel through a new pipeline, which was also used to deliver food. Drilling to push through a pipe big enough for them to climb out, though, is due to start again. It was suspended on Friday due to a machine fault and fears of a fresh collapse. Russia says that Ukraine has failed to carry out a landing operation in the occupied Kherson region. Kyiv said earlier this month that its forces had crossed the Dnipro and established several bridgeheads on the eastern bank of the river. But Moscow's defense minister says Russian Marines have scuppered Ukrainian attempts to gain a further foothold. At least 4 people have been killed after heavy storms in Brazil caused widespread flooding. Several villages have been cut off and more than 1,500 people have been moved from their homes. The country's been hit by extreme weather recently. It recorded its hottest ever temperature of 44.8 degrees Celsius on Sunday. The authorities in Iceland are warning that a volcanic eruption in the country's southwest could happen with just 30 minutes warning. The country's meteorological service says magma may now be very high up in the Earth's crust, and the government is taking every measure to try to prevent a disaster. Our correspondent Johannes Pletschberger reports.
Arman Gardason is checking in for his night shift in the volcano danger zone.
Yeah, we are building the big wall for the lava, for the new lava, and we are building up the wall with the old lava there.
Using Iceland's hard lava soil, Arman and his team erect walls around the Reykjanes power plant to protect it from the expected lava flows. Justice Minister Guðrún Hafsteinsdóttir says damage to the plant could create a major problem for the region because it's the peninsula's only energy source.
There is not an alternative now for the power plant in Reykjanes.
but we have been working on solutions what to do. But we would be forced to use oil or gas as people are using in Europe and other countries, which we are not used to, and we don't have an infrastructure for that.
Since a 15-kilometer magma crack opened up in the Reykjanes village of Grindavik, the country has been on high alert, bracing for an imminent eruption. One of Iceland's most effective measures against volcanic and seismic damage is the country's extremely strict construction code. Fortified foundations, steel-reinforced concrete columns, and the ability of tall buildings to swing and balance out the many earthquakes. So far, that construction code has succeeded in preventing disaster. When the earthquake sliced Grindavik in two, not a single building collapsed. Meanwhile, scientists from Iceland's Met Office are closely monitoring what is going on inside the crack, as well as underneath the power plant.
I am working with deformation, so that's mostly setting up GPS stations, looking at deformation. And others might be setting up seismic stations. There are gas people trying to see if we are seeing volcanic gases there. There are people mapping how the faults, how things have changed. And there are all sorts of measurements.
But despite all these measurements, the precise location of the expected eruption remains unclear. Johannes Blechberger, CGTN, Reykjavik.
The headlines again. China's president says Israel is carrying out collective punishment on the people of Gaza. Xi Jinping has called for a ceasefire as leaders of the Big Five emerging economies discuss the humanitarian crisis in the besieged Palestinian enclave. Our other headlines, the armed group Hamas says a truce is approaching, but no confirmation yet from Israel. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Hello and welcome to the weather forecast. I'm Tierney. Well, over to Europe. And currently, a rather potent low-pressure system is gripping the majority of the northern half of the continent, indicating more snowy conditions are likely to develop in the region in the next few days, possibly. And we can notice that snow will be rather prevalent as we head into Thursday, and most of them will be in the form of some light to moderate intensity of snow, with potentially scattered heavy snow setting the stage here for the higher elevations as well as the mountainous areas. So please take a necessary precaution to stay safe. And meanwhile, here for the majority of the west as well as the central portions of Europe are likely to see the return of some overcast conditions. And temperature-wise, we can notice that the northern portion will be rather cold over the next couple of days. Most of the high temperatures will be about 5 to 10 degrees Celsius below freezing. And even here for the majority of the central portions, we'll see high temperatures just hovering in the single digits over the next few days. So please bundle up and put on your warm jackets as well. And about business and travel, and showers for Copenhagen with high of 10 and low about 4 degrees Celsius on Thursday, and potential winter mix for Helsinki with high of 1 and low temperatures about 4 degrees Celsius below freezing. And over to Moscow, we'll see some light to moderate intensity of snow with both the high and low temperatures in the negative reading. So please take care and stay warm.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.